In this session, we're going to talk about analysing, adapting your plan, and then sharing the results. This Adaptive Management for Conservation training program is supported by UNDP with GEF financing. It's delivered by Conservation Management and Community Solutions in partnerships with the Blue Mountains World Heritage Institute. The source material is used under a Creative Commons licensing based on original materials developed by the Conservation Measures Partnership and Protected Area Solutions. So, we're really coming to the end of going round the cycle of the conservation standards. Step 4 is analysing and adapting your plan, and it has several components: preparing data, analysing results, and then adapting your plan. What are some of the key reasons we do this step? Really to answer the following questions. So it's very useful to know, are the key steps in our plan complete, or do they need some more work? As you start using the plan, you want to know, are you using it? How completely are you using it? When you get a bit further through, you want to go back and check, is the plan logical? Does it make sense? Are we getting the results we wanted? As you keep going, again, you want to understand, what are those results telling us? If we're not getting the results that we want, what might we need to change? And then it's also really important to periodically ask, what have we learnt so far, and who should we tell? So key components of analysing and adapting your plan are gathering information, making sure you've stored it somewhere, and then analysing it. You want to make sure that you're not gathering or storing data that you're not going to use later. So you should really think about the data you're gathering and how you're going to use that to answer different questions. You really want to think about how you set up perhaps a timetable to adapt the plan or adapt strategies. When are you going to review it? To do this, again, you want to be really thinking about creating what we call a cultural review. You want the project team to be looking at it and thinking, as a team, how are we going? But you might also want them from time to time to invite external people to come and take a look and give them some external advice on where they might be able to do better. Here are some of the key questions we might ask at each of those levels. When we're thinking about strategies and actions, we might ask questions like, what did we do? How much effort did it take? When we're thinking about results or outcomes, especially the threat reduction result, we're asking questions like, have things changed? Has the threat reduced? And when we're thinking about impact or reaching our goals, we're really asking, has target health been maintained or improved? To do this, 9 elements are needed. We need data and information for our strategies, outcomes, and impact. We need to analyse that data at all 3 levels, and we need to think about how we're going to adapt at all 3 levels. Here's an example to help think about how you might approach things. This has taken a results chain from a Chinese team who were looking at improving the health of some fir forests in Yunnan. The threat they were dealing with was logging, and the strategy they chose was outreach to provide alternative energy devices. If we're thinking about their strategy implementation, what question are we asking? We might be asking, every year, are we using the plan? The sorts of indicators we might have are the number of proposals written, the number of grants received, and the number of households contacted. When we're starting to think about analysing, what we really mean is we're going to reflect and interpret the data. Are we progressing all the actions as planned? If not, why not? When we start to think about adapting, we're asking questions like, do we need new actions? Do we need new resourcing? We might do this in some ways through when we're thinking about assessing our progress on activities, we can apply some progress ratings. When we do this in midterm reviews and we ask the question, did we use the old plan? In this example, you can see that largely the actions were done or working well. There were a much smaller number of actions which were not completed. There were some which have been abandoned, and there are some which are still to do. But overall, the plan has been used. When we're thinking a little bit more about outcomes, and if we look at our results chains, these are our intermediate results here leading up to threats. The sort of questions we're asking are our strategies working? And realistically, we would ask these questions every 1 to 3 years. The indicators we might use: number of units switched, the volume of wood consumed, or changes in forest cover. When we're analysing our data, we might need to know things like, do we have enough data? Are we progressing fast enough towards our goal? What has helped us and what has stopped us? Again, when we're adapting our plan, we need to understand, do we need new strategies or actions, or are the ones we have already going to get us there? Do we need more resourcing, or is the current level sufficient? At this point, we're also thinking about revising the threat table. In this project, an analysis of fox control measures might tell us that this risk can now be changed to medium. But further down the table, perhaps we weren't monitoring or controlling weeds, and now the threat is increased because it's getting more recreational use. So this is a really good point, every year to every 3 years, to be thinking about, have we made changes to our threat table? Then the most important thing in the long term for us to really understand is all that work leading us towards making an impact? Is it leading us towards a healthier set of targets? Realistically though, this is not something we can easily assess every year. We might get a sense of the trend, but it's very useful every 5 to 10 years to really think about, is the health of our targets improving? To do this, you're really looking at the trends in the indicators that you set up in the initial health table. So in this case, forest health indicators, perhaps forest size or forest condition indicators. When you're reflecting, you're really looking to see, what is the trend? Is the health improving, or is it getting worse? And again, the adaptation questions are really around, do we need new strategies or actions? Do we need more resourcing? And at this point, we're really interested in seeing whether we can update the health table and change some of the colours in the chart from, for example, yellow to green or fair to good health. Through this process, you may have noticed we use a lot of colour-coded reporting, which we find is really useful. It gives a really great pictorial snapshot, which people find easy to understand in terms of how things are progressing. So on this example, you can see that the conservation targets and the threats have very nice colour-coded reporting set out at different periods, so 2006, 2011 and 2016. And that really helps us see how the story is changing over time. To actually make this happen, we actually need review to become a good habit. It needs to be a regular part of what you do. You need a commitment from your team and from your managers to support, review, and act on the outcomes of your evaluations. Ideally, you also want this culture review to be internally driven. You want people to perceive this as a benefit, not just as a compliance activity. We want people to see this is how they can improve their performance, do a better job, and feel better about how they're contributing. One way of setting up a culture review is to think about having a specific group of people who are responsible for this. Stuart has been very involved with a monitoring and evaluation committee, and in fact I was involved with it as a donor for a period too. And the role of the committee was to really work with the people who are implementing the plans and the people who are responsible for the governance of the plan to review and evaluate on a regular basis how the plan was doing, and to review it in that structure where they looked at the question of, is the plan being used? Are we seeing the results we wanted to see? And is the health of our targets improving? Once you've reviewed and assessed your plan, it's important to think about who you tell about what you've learned. This brings us around to step 5, share. Why do we do this share step? We do it to actually help teams think in creative ways about how to present the work, using stories that highlight the most critical and empowering messages. We also do it to help teams decide who they need to tell about their plan and how they will actually communicate that. A communication document tells different audiences about the plan at different times. So it's important to look at your plan and think about who you need to tell, what you need to tell them, and how you will tell them about the plan. When we're thinking about our audience for sharing, we need to think about our stakeholders. Who do you need to engage, and why do you need to engage them? How can you best show respect to those people if you're trying to influence them? How do you actually create a compelling message? What information about the problem or solution helps change the audience's perceptions? What do people need to know about how to implement solutions? What information about the consequences of a desired action is not well understood? What do people care about? What do they want to change? It's quite important to think about things from the perspective of your audience rather than just deciding the message. We suggest when you're sharing information that you think about using more than one communications tool. For example, if you're talking to different audiences about your plan and what you want to achieve, we suggest you might need a short plan that has a small number of achievable strategies related to the vision, targets, and threats. For a funder, you might need a 3 to 5 year detailed action plan, which specifies all the resources needed. For other audiences, you might need even more detailed information about how you're going to do specific things in separate resource documents or supporting documents. When you're working with local communities, a plain English or pidgin, storybook or poster version of the plan might be a much better way of engaging the whole community. It's also important to remember to continue to communicate the plan through regular updates and reports. Today's exercise is in 2 parts again. In the first part, we're going to practice plan review by looking back at the pre-plan work you did on day 2 and adapt that plan based on what you now know about the process. In your teams, we want you to discuss and record what changes, if any, you would make to your thinking about the pre-plan, and then revise that pre-plan to make a new one. The second part of the exercise is really thinking about how you'll communicate and share your plan. As part of this, you can start thinking about how to get your materials in order for your presentation next week. But the really key step for this, and that we'd like to see reflected in your presentation next week, is for you to consider what the key audiences for this plan might be and what sort of formats you might actually use to communicate this plan to different audiences.